Good morning, everyone. Oh, we heard the engine fire up. That must mean it is time for Ron the Car Guy from Westside Auto Pros to teach you a little something about your vehicle that you may or may not have known about. And this is a topic which is very important, especially this time of year, Ron, as we're talking about, roads in the very near future are going to be icy and slick, and probably would be a very good idea to woe your vehicle, as they say.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to talk a little bit about the brake system. More importantly, brake fluid, the forgotten fluid.
The forgotten fluid.
I call it the forgotten fluid because everybody forget. Did you wake up this morning and think about your brake fluid?
Should I be? I feel like there's the fluids I should not be worried about. Is that one I should be worried about?
You check your gas, you check your oil, you check your windshield washer
I'm not even sure we check our oil anymore.
But
not unless the car yells at me.
But your brake fluid?
The brake fluid, yeah. People think nothing about changing the oil in their car. I mean, that's routine. We've been programmed to do that. And for the most part, the same with like transmission fluid. I mean, we've all heard about that. We know it needs to be changed. We're not thrilled that we have to go change it, but we're aware of it at least. But brake fluid, that's one of those services that people aren't aware of. I mean, it's out of sight, it's out of mind. I remember when I was a little guy, before I was even a car guy, growing up, I grew up on a farm, and I remember the only thing you maybe looked at the brake fluid in a car for was to see if there was some there. And if there wasn't, you put more in. And put the old wire bail back up on it and drove down the road. You didn't worry about where it went. So, a couple things to keep in mind is, one, if your car's low on brake fluid, there's a problem because it's not a consumable. If it's not on the
should be a closed system, right?
It is, exactly. It's a closed system. If it's not on the inside, then it's on the outside somewhere and there's an issue. So if you're having to add brake fluid, I mean, that's red flag number one. But more importantly now, is changing the brake fluid and flushing the brake fluid system. And the European car manufacturers, I mean, they've been doing this for 20, 30 years. I mean, they've been on this for a long time. And a lot of the Asian car manufacturers are now on board with doing this. But unfortunately, a lot of our domestic car manufacturers, they don't have a service interval. They don't have change it every 2 years.
I was going to say, why don't we hear about this?
Because brake systems have gotten complex, and they've gotten very expensive. And so what we're seeing is, since cars came out with anti-lock brake systems, they have components on there that are driven by electronics. They've got little valves and moving pieces. I mean, some of them are as small as a pencil lead. And those components are prone to rust and corrosion. And what happens is brake fluid is what they call hydroscopic. It's like a sponge. So its job is to absorb moisture and protect all the components in the brake system from corrosion and rust. Now, just like a sponge, it can only absorb so much moisture.
Right.
And then it's saturated.
Exactly. And then when it gets to that point, it's like, okay, I can't take on any more moisture. And so it just lets it go throughout the system. And then that's what creates rust and corrosion.
Okay.
So what we're seeing is cars come in and they've got the expensive parts of the brake system that maybe we didn't have on cars 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
And they failed. And those components can be $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 to repair or replace. And it's all something that could have been prevented if we'd taken care of the brake fluid. So it's important to have that fluid tested and changed as needed.
I was going to say, is that something we check? Like, I don't even know, where would I check the brake fluid?
There's not really a brake fluid dipstick, is there?
No, there's not a brake fluid dipstick. There's no light that comes on the dash. Well, there is one that comes on the dash, but that's the one that tells you the brake fluid's low, which is a whole different story. And you can't tell by looking at it. I mean, I've looked at brake fluid that was completely discolored. I mean, it was near black in my color world. And yet we test it and it tests fine. It's not an issue.
Which means the moisture content was still low enough where it's still working.
Correct. Or I've looked at brake fluid that looked like maybe it came out of the bottle yesterday, and you test it and it tests high for contamination. So you really can't you can't tell by looking at it.
Okay.
Now, do you just add fluid to the system, or do you have to totally evacuate the system and then replace everything?
Well, the way we do it at Westside Auto Pros, we've actually got a machine that hooks up to the car, and it's putting new fluid into the master cylinder, the reservoir where the brake fluid goes, and it is with a vacuum, it's pulling fluid through the system. So it flushes and cleans all the fluid out. It's kind of like flushing your radiator or even your transmission. It's moving fluid through there to get all the old contaminated. It doesn't do a lot of good to take out 1 pint of fluid and put a new pint in when you've got maybe 2 other pints floating around through the system. So we make sure that we get it all cleaned out. The other thing is, we talked about its ability to absorb moisture, but over time the industry has proven that that's maybe not the best test to check for moisture. So the way we test it is we're looking for dissolved copper in the brake fluid.
In the fluid.
And correct. What does that indicate?
The brake fluid has a lot of copper pieces in it. All the lines are lined with copper, and a lot of the parts
the brake system does?
Yeah, the brake system has a lot of copper in it. And what happens is copper's a really soft metal, so that's what's going to dissolve first. So when you start getting the corrosion and the acid builds up and stuff in there, it'll start dissolving away at the copper. So when we test brake fluid, we're looking for dissolved copper in the fluid. If there's dissolved copper, we know the fluid's not doing its job. Let's flush and get all that stuff out of there and put fresh fluid in.
How much does a flush like that cost?
It runs about $100
Okay.
to flush out a brake system, which is cheap considering
Compared to what it could cost.
I mean, like, we're talking $800 or $1,000 minimum
For a component?
If a component, and I've seen them upwards of $3,000 to fix something like
Really?
that. Yes.
So when should I start be thinking about this? Like, is it every
morning when you wake up? It should be the first thing that you think
The
about.
first stop sign that you come
brake
to.
Absolutely. Yeah, the first stop sign you come to, and the light comes on and the pedal goes to the floor. No, rule of thumb. I mean, if you don't want to test it, or where you take your car doesn't have the ability to test it, every couple of years is a good rule of thumb.
Okay.
But the test is really easy. It takes about 60 seconds, and we've got a dip strip that we just put into the brake fluid. We pull it out. We wait 30 seconds. And it'll change colors, which doesn't do you and I any good. But
You'll find somebody that can see it.
there's somebody that can see color in their world, and they'll look at a chart. And it will tell us how many parts per million of dissolved copper's in there. Because a little bit's okay. I mean, that's kind of going to happen.
Is it similar to what they use for the testing aquariums?
Exactly.
Same type of
yeah,
thing? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we do it with every oil change. I mean, anytime we service,
do?
yeah, anytime
Oh,
we
I didn't know
service a
that.
car, we check your brake fluid. And so if you're in getting your oil changed and we call you up and tell you that your brake fluid needs to be changed, we're not doing that just because we want another $100 out of you. We're doing it because it's a lot easier to flush that brake system than replace a big expensive component
Right.
that nobody's probably budgeted for anyway.
And
Right.
since the vehicle's already there.
Exactly. Exactly.
So next time you take your vehicle in for service, make sure you ask, because not everybody,
Yeah.
I'm sure, just does something
Yeah.
like
Can
that.
you test my brake fluid?
Okay.
Not check the level because well, you want to check the level. You want to know there's brake fluid in there, but you have a light
More
for that. on your dash.
importantly-
More importantly, can you test the condition of my brake fluid?
Test the
Okay.
condition of the brake fluid.
Absolutely.
Well, just something to keep in mind.
If people want more information, Ron, how can they get in touch with you
They
guys?
can go to westsideautopros.com. You can contact me through there, or you can go to askronthecarguy.com. I answer all questions.
There you go.
Perfect.
Great job as always,
Thank
man.
you so much.
And next week, let's give a preview of what we're talking about next week.
Brake fluid.
We're going to
brake
talk
fluid.
a little bit about getting your car ready for winter, as well as getting your car ready for winter if you're going to store it
All
and
right,
not
so
drive
that's
it.
All right,
that's
I'm
what's
just
coming
thinking
up
about
next
brake
week.
fluid right now.
We'll be right back. You're watching